Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no problem. Please, Scott, tell a little bit about yourself. Who is Scott Maderer?
Sure. So I'm a coach. I call myself a stewardship coach, meaning that I help folks master their time, their talent, and their treasure so that they can live out their calling. So, what does that look like? Well, a lot of the folks that come to me for help are folks that are feeling like, there's something I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be starting a business, or I'm supposed to be doing something other than the career or the job or the area I'm in. But I kind of feel like I've got golden handcuffs in some way. I either don't have enough time or I don't have enough money to be able to go out and live out my calling. And so a lot of those folks come in looking for help. They usually think the problem is time or money. The real problem is usually not time or money. It's actually them, and not in terms of them being a problem, but in terms of the way they handle themselves is how they handle their time and their money. And so we work a lot on that. Previous to this, I've been a school teacher. I did that for 16 years. I worked in the corporate world for 11 years. I wrote tests for a living. My wife and I have been married now 28 years. We've got an adult son who is successfully launched and out of the house, which is always a good blessing when that happens. And we live here in South Texas, out kind of in the middle of nowhere.
What would you say is the difference between a calling and a career?
So a lot of times, and that's a great question, because a lot of times I think we get those confused. We think of what we do for a living, and that has to be our calling. And what I've always tried to explain is the roles you do, the job you do, those sorts of things, those are what I call assignments. They're particular roles or particular responsibilities that you have at a particular point in time. Your calling, however, is deeper than that. It's bigger than that. The calling comes from outside. So I'm a person of faith. I believe it comes from God. But even if you're not a person of faith, it's that call or that direction or that pull that lies deeper than just whatever you're doing. What you're doing at that moment, your calling is expressed through it. So the kind of father you are, well, that's an expression of your calling. The kind of work that you do at whatever job you have, that could be an expression of your calling. But the calling is that passion or that direction that lies deeper than that. So, for example, for me, as I've worked through and kind of examined all of the different roles and things that I've done, the thread that keeps showing up that I consider my passion or my calling or the direction is finding ways to actually help other people live out their passion. Whenever I'm doing that, that's when I come alive. That's when I have energy. That's when I have direction. That's when those things come back to me and I'm like, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I belong. And so I used to express that as a teacher with my students. Then in the corporate world, I expressed it with the leaders that reported to me and developing them. Now, as a coach, I do that with my clients as well. But I've also done it with my son, with my wife, with friends at church, all of the different places that I show up.
Can past experiences and disappointments and suffering help you find your calling?
Absolutely. So one of the exercises that I actually have folks do is a looking back exercise, which what that's about is sitting down and, like you said, identifying all of your past things, all of your past experiences, all of your past roles, everything you've done, everything you've experienced, every relationship you've had, basically as fully as you can, just brainstorming all of these different items. And then sitting down and kind of putting two columns next to each item. The first column is what did I love about it? What did I enjoy? What gave me energy? What brought me happiness? However you want to phrase that. And the other one is what did I hate about it, or what stole energy from me? What did I not like? What didn't bring me joy? And you kind of begin to brainstorm through all of these different roles and responsibilities and activities. And then you're looking for patterns, not just in what shows up that you love, but also in what shows up that took energy from you or that you don't love. Because a lot of times out of that can begin to kind of bubble up. Okay, my passion is in alignment with these things that keep showing up over and over and over again in the love column. And what I want to try to get less of in my life is the stuff that keeps showing up in the hate column.
What would you say to someone who feels like, as they say, like the universe sometimes might be against them, like life beats them up, like there's always disappointment, failures, and all that? What would you have to say to those people?
Well, first off, I think all of us have periods in our life where we feel that way. So I don't think that's abnormal. I don't think it makes you messed up or anything else like that. But what happens a lot of times is we create looking at a situation and we take the moment, the point that we're in time, that photograph or that snapshot of the moment, and we think that that's going to be the reality forever. And the reality is your life is a film strip. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you that tomorrow is going to be different than today. And 6 months from now is going to be different from right now, too. And it's going to evolve and change. And so we have a tendency to do what I call the P's, which is we make a situation personal. It's about me. So it's not, I failed at this, it's, I am a failure. We tend to make things permanent. Not only did I fail, I always fail. And we tend to make things pervasive. So not only did I fail at this one thing, I fail at everything I do. It becomes about all of you and becomes kind of your identity. That's a limiting belief or a series of limiting beliefs. And so a lot of times we need to reframe, restructure, and readdress those over time so that we can begin to shift, because you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to what happens to you.
Although you gotta say sometimes, I don't like to make comparisons, but people do sometimes. Some people have life easier than other. When you're
Sure.
doing,
Absolutely. But again, just because someone starts at a different place than you doesn't mean that you can give up and not do the best you can with the resources that you have. So again, I call myself a stewardship coach because the idea there is about all of us are given certain things that we're responsible for, certain things, giftings that we have, certain blessings that we have. Now, those are all different. You know, somebody may have grown up in a really blessed situation or has something happen to them that creates great, gifts or great blessings in their life. Somebody else may struggle each and every day. It's not about the fact that that's not true and that's not real, but what we have stewardship over, what we have control over, is those things that come into our life. And so what we can do is begin to look at what we do have control over as opposed to what we don't have control over, so that we can begin to make changes and move in a better direction. Now, are we going to necessarily end up at the same point as somebody who started the race a little further ahead? No, but that's not what we should focus on. Instead, we should focus on moving as far in the direction that we're called to go and let other people worry about the direction that they're called to go.
they always say to be grateful for what you have.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, like the situation of someone might be so dark. How do you find good in the bad?
A lot of times that comes with age and experience. I think it's training yourself to look for the good is something that we have to do all of the time. So when we have crisis, when things go wrong, the character that we've developed when we didn't have crisis is what comes out and what's magnified. So if you've done exercises, like I do a gratitude journal each and every day, and I've been doing this now for decades. And so every day, at the end of the day, I write down 3 things that happened today that I'm grateful for. Sometimes those are really little things. Sometimes those are great big things. It just kind of depends on the day. But by doing that and doing that for so long, I've trained my brain to constantly, as I go throughout the day, I'm looking for little nuggets that, like, oh, wow, that was a good blessing. Maybe I'll write that down this afternoon. Oh, wow, that was something that I could be thankful for. Sometimes it's as simple as getting up in the morning. Other times it's the sunrise, or getting my dog behind me and getting to pet her and love on her. Other times it's, wow, something big happened. I got a new opportunity or a promotion or a raise or something big in my life, or maybe a relationship change. I met a new person that's brought joy into my life. Whatever it is, you're training your brain to look for those things that you can be thankful for all of the time, big or small. And as you do that, then when the crisis comes, it's easier. It still stinks. You still have that moment of, oh, everything's going wrong today. Nothing's working. My life is a country song. Everything's horrible. But you begin to train your brain so it responds with, wait a minute, this thing's good. That thing over there is good. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. And you can get out of those periods of funk quicker. You're still going to have them, but your recovery is better.
A lot of times they say, trust the process. What do
Mhm.
you have to say about that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. When the process is the right process, then leaning into it and trusting it is a good thing. The trick is stepping back and making sure that the processes that you're following are actually the right ones. Because I think a lot of times we fall into habits and routines and things that we always do, and we're just always doing them because that's the way it's always been done. We're doing it because that's the way I've developed a habit of doing it. It's not necessarily really the best thing or the right thing or the right thing for me. Instead, it's just the thing, that I've always done it that way. And so I do think you should always be examining the processes that you're following to make sure that you can't improve them, you can't tweak them, or even throw them out and change to a new process. But once you've found things that are working, I do think you lean in and trust and give it a long enough time. One of the things that I think happens a lot of times is we're enamored by the next shiny object or the next activity or the next fun thing that comes along. And so we're constantly bouncing from thing to thing to thing instead of leaning in and giving things enough time to really work or really develop or really find out whether or not this is something that we should be doing. There's always a learning curve, they call it, right? And there's a period where you go through that's usually going to be a period where it just feels like, man, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to master this. This is never going to work for me. And a lot of times pushing through that valley, success lies on the other side of it. So it is a balance between, experimenting and tweaking and finding new things and leading into a process and giving it long enough to develop and really find out whether or not it works. So I always take the frame of mind of I'm running experiments, and I call them experiments, first off, because I have a science background, but secondly, because the purpose of an experiment is just to get data. It's just to find out yes or no, good or bad. Did this work? Did this not work? It's not a value statement. It's not about, you succeeded or failed. Instead, it's just data. It's just information. And so if you're constantly running experiments and finding out what processes work, then you can lean into the ones that work, and you can run experiments and find out something else didn't work, and you can discard those, but you're doing it with data, with information, with review, with reflection, with intentionality, not just willy-nilly bouncing from thing to thing.
We were talking before about limiting beliefs. Sometimes we can have limiting beliefs coming from the world, society, culture. Talk to us about that.
So first off, I would tweak and say not sometimes, but always. So we all have limiting beliefs. And by the way, if you root out a layer of limiting beliefs and you kind of get rid of them and get them out of your life, usually what you'll discover is a new set of limiting beliefs, because we all have these sort of internal scripts that we tell ourselves. And like you said, sometimes they're coming from outside, they're coming from society, they're coming from culture. They may be coming from your childhood. They may be coming from past experiences you've had. Whatever it is, a limiting belief is simply a statement that we have that puts a limit on us that may or may not be true. And so we've got to actually look at those beliefs and examine them. And a lot of times we can find evidence that that belief isn't true. The limiting beliefs that are dangerous tend to be the ones that are very absolutist. So I always, I never, I'm this. We're kind of making an absolute statement. Those tend to be the ones that are holding us back from our real success and from what we're really supposed to be doing. I'll never have enough money to travel. I'll never have enough time to spend with my kids. Those kinds of absolutist beliefs come up in our brain. I had the experience one time of speaking to a group of about 500 highly successful business people, entrepreneurs. All of these folks, by any external measure, anyone looking at them would say, these people have got it all together. They're successful. They've got businesses that are running. They've got great families. Everything's going their way. And I asked them, how many of you have an internal voice that talks to you in some way, either in words or in pictures? Every single person's hands went up. I said, great. Now keep your hand up. If that voice is nice to you, put your hand down. Nobody put their hand down. Everybody's standing there with their hand up, because we all have those internal voices, those internal scripts that run in our head that tell us we're not good enough. We're not going to succeed. We'll never do it. And so uncovering those once you've kind of found them, and that's just as a matter of listening to yourself, I always tell folks to write them down, and then next to it, create what I call an enabling truth. So this is sort of an answer to that limiting belief. I never do this. Well, that's not true, because here's an example of a time when I did do that. I always do this. Well, that's not true, because here's an example of a time when I didn't do that. You're looking for those sorts of feelings, statements, activities, behaviors that you've exhibited that sort of disprove the limiting belief. And you write those down next to the limiting belief. And then what I actually do is I read those enabling truths each and every morning. So I'm literally going through, again, I'm back to programming my brain, just like gratitude, where I'm programming my brain where that limiting belief, when it comes into my head, my brain almost automatically says the enabling truth. It says, wait a minute, that's not true. Here's an example. And so again, over time, that begins to shift you from those limiting beliefs where you're not dwelling on them as much. They still come, through your brain, but your brain almost answers them and you move on past them relatively quickly. It's almost a form of meditation in terms of having a thought come in and then discovering a way to let go of it so that you can move on past it.
Talk to us about the importance of self-care, because sometimes mentally it could be really hard on a person.
Yes. Self-care. I think the biggest fallacy about self-care is that it's selfish. That if we take care of ourselves, we're somehow neglecting other people or not doing what we're supposed to do for others. And therefore we have to do all of that stuff and before we take care of ourselves. The problem with that is, and the analogy everyone uses is the oxygen mask that drops out of the plane, and put the mask on yourself before you put it on your child, because otherwise you're going to pass out and now the kid can't put it on themselves, and now there's two people in trouble. Same thing happens with self-care. The truth is, if all you are ever doing is focusing on other people and you never refill your own cup, you never take care of your own needs, then ultimately you won't be there to take care of those people. You won't be there to provide that resource. So you do have to have a certain amount of time that you set aside, a certain amount of money that you set aside, a certain amount of activity that you set aside that is focused on giving you what you need to fill up your cup, to fill up your battery, so that you can then go ahead and interact with the world in a way that's positive as opposed to a way that's negative. Ultimately, that's the way that we kind of all build each other up and all have that growth mindset so that we can succeed together.
What would you say to someone who feels like they're late in their journey, and they're probably lacking energy, drive, and passion or desire? What would you say to them?
Are you still sucking wind? And the point to that is, it's never really too late. You can only start from the point you're at. That's it. You have no other choice. You can only operate in the present. You can only operate in the moment you're in. You can't go back in time and change the past. If anyone has that technology, let me know. But last I checked, there's still no time machines. We can't go back in time and change the past. We really can't even guarantee the future. You may get hit by a bus tomorrow morning. You may not even be alive tomorrow. That's entirely possible. You may pass away in your sleep. So all you can really control is the present. So certainly you can plan for the future and you can do things in the present to make that more likely to happen. And certainly you can learn from the past. You can think about what happened before and what lessons can I learn from it. But we have to focus on operating in the present. And so no matter what age you are, whether you're 20, 25, 30, 35, 80, 85, 90, or 95, if you're still alive and still moving forward, there's still something that you can do, something else that you have that you can be called. Maybe it's pouring into the next generation. Maybe it's helping somebody else with all those skills that you've amassed over the years and teaching something to somebody. Maybe it's just being a great grandparent or aunt or uncle or godparent or volunteer or nonprofit board member or whatever. There's a million things that you can do that have value for you and for others, but you've got to focus on what it is that you can do in the present moment and not worry about the fact that, quote, I'm starting too late. I've screwed up too many times. There's no way I can recover from that. You can recover as much as you can recover because you can operate in the present with some sort of future activity or future plans.
What would you say makes people achieve great things in their life?
I think a couple of things come to mind. The first one is defining what they mean by great things. And by the way, I said what they mean, not what other people mean. We each get to define our own greatness. We each get to define what success is to us, what's important to us, what do I value, what are the things that I feel called to do. Nobody else gets to define that for you. You have to define that for yourself. So that's the first thing, because doing great things, first you got to know what you mean by great things. And I don't care if what you define as great things is what the world defines as great or somebody else defines as great. I want to help you achieve what you define as great, what you define as success, what you find valuable and important and gives you energy and passion and calling. So that's the first step. And honestly, that one can be pretty hard. The second thing is I find people that actually go through the process of not trying to change everything by hitting it out of the park. I think a lot of times we have this fallacy that the only way to make really big change is to have a massive change, from point A to point B. I've got to kick the habit. I've got to throw everything out the window. I've got to start completely. Everything's got to be different tomorrow. And instead, most successful people focus on a process of making a plan, executing on the plan, review and reflect on what happened, revise for the next day, and kind of repeat that. And they do that at a daily level, a weekly level, a monthly level, a quarterly level, an annual level, whatever it is. You can kind of think of this as those Chinese nesting dolls that, at any scale, you're constantly looking at what's the next step, what's the next plan, and then getting data, revising, reflecting, and improving so that over time, you're getting a little bit better each and every day, each and every week, each and every month. You're making slightly better improvements. Sometimes it's, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but you still made 1 step forward. And by doing that incremental improvement, that incremental change, that's usually the people that have real successes that last a long time, and that they can look back at, at a later point in life and go, I've had a good life. I've been blessed. Things have gone well overall, rather than the folks that try to change everything just right away, fell swoop, massive change. That tends to not stick. That tends to not continue. They slip back to old habits. They slip back to old patterns, and they go right back to where they were before.
Where can people find you on social or the internet?
Absolutely. So I actually put together a special page just for your listeners. So if you go over to inspiredstewardship.com/lifestyle, so that's inspiredstewardship.com/lifestyle. I've got a special page there just for your listeners. It's got some resources on it, some of those activities that we just talked about, like the looking backward, looking forward. Those activities are on there. You can access them for free. It's got information about my book, Inspired Living, that also has a bunch of these activities and a whole bunch more that we didn't talk about today. My own podcast over there, and all of that information, all the ways you can get in touch with me. And that includes, if you want to jump on my calendar and have a 30-minute conversation, that's on there as well. And I'd welcome anyone that's interested in that. I'd love to have a chat with you.
What's the name of the podcast, and what's the podcast all about?
Sure. It's called Inspired Stewardship, and it's just on that. It's about living your life in an intentional way and stewarding the resources that God has given you. So we talk a little bit about faith. We talk a little bit about time. We talk a little bit about talent. We talk a little bit about money and treasures, depending on the week. I've been doing it now since 2018, and there's about 1,500 episodes. So there's plenty out there if you want to binge on it.